I am here to talk about acceptance versus settling. This is something that comes up a lot with couples that are struggling, couples that are on the brink. There's a common area of confusion that comes up where spouses are, and they might take a different side of this question, but they really wonder, should I stay? Should I go? Am I accepting for the sake of the higher good of the marriage, and that's what I should be doing? Or am I settling? And how do I know the difference? So I hear questions like, can this marriage be saved? Should this marriage be saved? Should I even still be working on this marriage? Am I overreacting? Am I throwing in the towel too soon? How long should I hang in there? These are questions that come up as people are really trying to figure out, like, where is the yardstick that I should be using? And I know I had these questions too when my husband and I were struggling, and it feels really messy. And the worst part is not having clarity. It's so much easier when you have clarity and you know exactly what you're looking for and you know how to answer these questions for yourself. Even if you have to make a difficult decision, clarity helps you do that and get through the toughest times when you have clarity. The worst is when you're second guessing and you really don't know if it's the right decision and you're sort of 1 foot in, 1 foot out, and you can't really commit either way. So what I want to do today is I want to go over some things that you can ask yourself to decide, am I settling, or is this just part of the acceptance that a healthy marriage requires? The first thing I want to ask, or that I want you to ask yourself really, is, what are your life dreams, and are you able to have this marriage? Are you able to imagine a future in your marriage with this life dream that you have? Are you able to also live your life dream? Is your spouse able to live their life dream? And I guess we can't really answer that unless we know what our life dreams are. And so I want to take a minute and just explain what that is. Life dreams, they're not just interests or things that you love to do, things that you think would be wonderful to experience in this lifetime, like a nice to have. I really think of it as not a preference or something like that. It's more like something you must have. It's something that if you don't have in your life, that you would regret it on your deathbed. Right? So for you, your life dream might be to become your best self, to grow spiritually, to raise your kids to trust themselves, to have healthy communication with your children or great relationships with your children because you didn't have great relationships with your parents. And so that is part of what you need to do in this lifetime, is to evolve in such a way that by the time your life is ending and you reflect back, you say, I did the most important thing. Right? There might have been some things I didn't get to experience, but the most important things to me, I was able to experience. That's what a life dream is. Now, I'm going to give some examples too, because sometimes these can be, they will appear to be mutually exclusive, but most of the time, I would say, most of the time, if you're already married to somebody, you probably already have enough overlap in your life dreams, although people can change and people can grow and evolve in a marriage and then suddenly come to realize that their life dreams are not compatible. Now, when I say compatible, what I mean is you don't actually have to share the same life dreams, but if you have to give up your life dream so that your spouse can have theirs, or vice versa, then that would be settling, right? If your life dream is to travel the world and your spouse's life dream is to have a secure home base and have financial security, you might be able to find a way where you can have both, right? And come to the table and say, even though we're in gridlock around certain things and we're arguing about certain things that are connected to our life dreams, if you can come to the us place and like figure out, all right, maybe we can do both. What would that look like? You can think outside the box. If you can find a way to make your marriage a container or a springboard for your life dreams, whether they're shared or different, then I don't think that that's settling. I think that that's just acceptance of your differences. A lot of times we put a lot of pressure on our spouse to be the same as us. And we think if they don't share our interests or they don't prioritize the same things or they have different thresholds than we do, whether that's for connection or adventure or certain kinds of experiences that you might want to have, that we move into judgment and we feel like it's a deal breaker when really it doesn't have to be. So you want to ask yourself, what must I have in this life so that there's not going to be any regrets on my deathbed? And what can I let go of? What am I fighting for now? What am I in conflict around right now that actually on my deathbed won't really matter? Those are the things that we can put under the category of acceptance, which is not a bad thing in a marriage, right? There has to be acceptance of our partner in the ways that they're different than us and in the ways that they might give different meaning to things that we hold really dear, but that doesn't have to be a deal breaker, and it doesn't mean that you're settling necessarily, right? So that's what you're really wanting to look at. And this is the most important thing, by the way. The life dreams is the number one thing you have to ask yourself first. Then, once you're clear on that, then we look at the health of the dynamics. If you want to look, this is the category that you can like discern, is this acceptance or settling? If you're looking at, is it supporting health or is it not supporting health? So this is how I can tell the difference, right? Acceptance is something that you do that you are in service of the health of the relationship. For example, good boundaries, right? Which would be, I accept that my partner is having an emotional reaction to something, but that's on his side of the street. It's not my problem, and I can accept that. And I don't have to fix it, or I don't have to have a problem with it, or I don't have to be in conflict with it. I can accept that. That would be an example. Or I can accept that my spouse doesn't care as much about the dishes as I do. And that's something that if I can accept that, that will promote greater connection in our relationship, right? We'll have an acceptance of each other's differences without making it a big deal. If it promotes closeness, if it promotes connection for both of you, and you feel like it's in service of the health of your relationship, then I consider that to be acceptance. Now, settling is something that you're doing. That's when you're like accepting things that support an unhealthy dynamic. So, for example, would be if you're accepting a lot of projection and blame. If your spouse is accepting a lot of projection and blame on your part. If you're saying or putting pressure on yourself to accept things that really aren't acceptable to you, like if your spouse has an untreated addiction, if there's an outside relationship and that feels like a deal breaker, if there is something that you're accepting like verbal abuse, or there's a lack of emotional safety, or your kids don't feel safe or cherished in your relationship. It could be something like emotional neglect, or just being roommates when what you really want is passion. And again, you have to go back to your life dreams to really understand how important is this to you. If both people are happy to just be roommates and neither of them cares about having passion, it's not a problem. And you can both accept that. But if one person is benefiting from that and the other person isn't, and they're settling and they look at their life dreams and they're feeling like this is not in service of that, and by accepting this, what I'm really doing is I'm supporting something that works against my life dreams and goes against the health of what I think is a healthy marriage, then I consider that to be settling. If you ask yourself this question, is what I'm accepting promoting a healthy connection in my marriage? And the answer is no, then that's when you want to rock the boat. That's when you want to rock the boat and take a stand based on your life dreams. And I don't mean, when I say take a stand, I'm not saying, you start telling somebody else how to behave or issue ultimatums, but it's important to share what you're here for, what you're available for, and what you're going to be putting your life energy into. Like, what are you supporting in the dynamics of the relationship? What are you not going to be supporting? What are you not going to engage in? And letting your spouse know that. And then you have to hold that, of course. You have to stick with that. But then if they want to keep a connection with you and they want to move towards healthy relating with you, that boundary that you set, and speaking from the place of what you desire and not reacting from the thing you don't like, that can move the needle a lot. That can be an invitation. That can be moving things forward in a better direction, right? It can be the leverage that you need to say, look, I love you. I want this to work, but here's what I can't do. Here's what I'm not going to do. Here's what I'm not going to be a part of. And here's what I do want. You never want to just only talk about what you're not going to do without having a clear, articulated vision of what you actually are here to build with your partner and what your family legacy is. Because it's just so much easier for your spouse to join you in something that feels like constructive than it is to react to something negative. Then the third thing you want to ask yourself, what is my level of authenticity in this marriage? So a lot of times we grow up believing, depending on our childhood experiences, that if we are authentically who we are, if we express the feelings that we're actually having, or say what we're really thinking, that we will lose connection, that we will be punished or ignored, or that we can't really speak our truth, right? And so then we just preserve the connection. And as children, the connection is survival. So we will stuff who we are to preserve the connection. Now, in a healthy relationship, you should not have to choose between authenticity and connection. Authenticity doesn't mean expressing everything in an unbridled way, right? You still have to express these things in a healthy way. But if you look at yourself honestly and you say, am I having to pretend like I'm not feeling something in order to stay connected? I would consider that to be settling. Now, if you say, okay, well, I bring something up to my spouse and I'm saying how I feel and they get mad at me, you do want to ask yourself the question, am I bringing it up in a healthy way? Am I engaging in losing strategies like unbridled self-expression? Am I doing major dumps on my partner and then lamenting the fact that it's not going well? You do want to do a personal inventory on that first and make sure you're coming forward with the right energy and you have the tools that you need to communicate in a healthy way. But if you do that, and you're coming forward and you're sharing your truth in a loving way and repeatedly, that puts you in a position where you are going to break connection or you're going to have to be in a state of conflict around that. I think of that as settling, right? You just want to be really clear on what is it that I really want from this interaction, and not coming from a codependent place. But if you notice, and we're looking at a ratio here always, right? Because nothing is ever all or nothing. There's always a percentage, right? A percentage of times where it might go well and a percentage of times where it won't go well. And if the percentage of times that you being yourself is going to cause a problem in the marriage or the relationship, or is going to sever your connection or the good feelings between you, that's settling. In that situation, when you're looking at authenticity, acceptance would be accepting your partner's authentic feelings, as long as they're not attacking you, and accepting also yourself. When you accept yourself, it doesn't matter if your partner is triggered by your authentic experience and you've shared it in an appropriate way. Maybe they're getting triggered from their own stuff, but if you accept yourself and you can be fully authentic and okay with yourself, you won't feel like their response is going to be so important, like that everything is hinging on how they can respond to you, because you know yourself, you honor yourself and who you really are, right? And that's authenticity. That really has to do with your relationship with yourself. But of course, in a healthy marriage, if you do that repeatedly and you still don't feel like your partner accepts who you are, then I think you're settling, and so you want to really be honest about that with yourself. And then the final thing is the emotional state that you have. So when I talk about emotional state, what is it that I mean? I'm talking about feeling deeply into yourself after certain interactions and knowing how you really feel and honoring what your feelings are telling you. So I think our emotions are our guidance system. Once we've cleared out like our own unhealed stuff, right? And we've done some inner work and we have some insights about our own triggers and our own wounding and how that bleeds into our relationship. We ought to be able to trust our emotions as our internal guidance system, as a source of wisdom, as, telling us what is right and what is not right. Now, this can be dicey if we're projecting or if we're not conscious and we're like projecting onto our partner all the stuff that lives in us that we brought to the relationship even before we met our spouse, right? So in order to be able to listen to your emotions in a way that you can trust, you do have to know the difference between your conscious, higher self and your old habitual programs. So this kind of relates to something I've talked about before, where people ask me, so when we're talking about the conscious mind and the subconscious programs and the battle between those things, we talk about intuition and things like this, fear versus intuition. And how do we know the difference between our intuition, which is our highest self, that's guiding us and telling us in our gut, and our feelings are telling us this isn't right, and I can listen to that because this is my intuition that has my best interests at heart? And how do I know if it's just fear, which is my automatic old default programs that are just trying to keep me safe and perceiving danger everywhere, and it's really the part of my psyche that wants to keep things the same out of self-protection? You have to know the difference between those two parts of yourself in order to know what you're listening to. So that's the big caveat here. And sometimes that requires a little bit of internal inventory to figure out what's really going on there. Let's say you do know the difference. If you think about things staying as they are in your marriage, and you imagine a future like, okay, this is how it's going to be forever, and you feel dread and stagnation, or you feel toxic when you think about it, that I would not recommend acceptance in that situation. I would take that as, okay, this is not right, so now I need to do something about that, right? But if it's your triggers and your reactions and your negative emotional state is coming to the surface because maybe your partner has a healthy boundary, but you're feeling triggered by that because that feels like rejection to you. Or if you're confused and you don't know, is it me or is it them? And I can't really tell if it's my triggers running the show. Obviously, you're not going to know what to listen to. But if you're aware enough to realize that what my emotional state is telling me is really negative, but it comes from my triggers, then that's an opportunity to work on yourself before you make any decisions about the relationship. And that's what I had to do in my marriage. I had to clean up my side and look at, because I knew I felt bad a lot of the time, but a lot of it was self-inflicted, and a lot of it came from fears from my past conditioning, from a lack of trust in myself, and things that I had to really clean up first before I could actually see clearly what was solvable and what wasn't solvable, if that makes sense. I mean, just ask yourself this: what is the emotional state that I have most of the time in my marriage when I'm bringing my best self and I know that I'm not, acting out or sabotaging it? If that's clear for you and you feel bad most of the time, that would be settling. And then you have to speak your truth and say, this isn't right. I don't want to feel this way anymore. And sometimes it's just an alignment thing. But once you're clear, then you can really listen to your feelings, right? And you're looking for the emotional state of, like, when we talk about fear versus intuition, the distinction is expansion versus contraction. If what you're feeling when you think about the future in your marriage is the potential of expansion, even though it might seem hard or scary and there's still things to learn, I would say that's a positive experience, a positive feeling, even if you're scared. If the overall sensation of that emotion is expansion and growth, even if it's scary, I would feel like that is your higher self leading you in the right direction, and that there's potential and it's not settling. But if you're really clear inside yourself that it's not your own triggers, and you recognize that when you think about your predominant emotional state and you think about the future of your relationship, and that emotional state is still connected to that vision into your future, and you've already done your own inner work, then that would be something you would have to raise and rock the boat and say, I really want to change this. In order for me to want to be a part of this dynamic, I need to see these changes. Here's what I'm going to do to support those changes. And then if that doesn't work, I would not recommend acceptance in that situation. I would look at that as, well, this is settling. And while I am definitely pro-marriage and I want couples to not give up too soon, because I see it happen and it's tragic when couples give up too soon, especially when you do have shared life dreams, especially when you do love each other, especially for those couples when they say, when it's good, it's really good. There's a lot to fight for, and it's probably something that's a solvable problem, even if you're feeling bad a lot of the time. So you really want to look at the quality of expansion versus constriction and ask yourself, have I already done my work? And if you feel as though you're settling, but you also haven't done all of your own inner work, I would say you want to move more into acceptance and say, I've played a part in this dynamic, so I need to untangle that, do the inner work, then look at the situation clearly. And if it still feels that way, then I won't settle. And because sometimes what we have to do is we have to prioritize our life dreams and the quality of the relationship that we want to have for our life over the person. And I know that feels like, well, that's not unconditional love. But I don't really think of as adult relationships as completely unconditional love, because we do have conditions, right? We all have some conditions. My conditions might be different than your conditions. But in an adult relationship, I don't believe that we are obligated to show the same kind of unconditional love that a parent ought to show their child, right? And we could reframe unconditional love and say, well, we can always still love somebody unconditionally, but we don't have to be in a relationship with them unconditionally. A marriage is a relationship with terms and conditions. Most marriages are bound by fidelity, and we say, for this marriage to work, we are faithful to each other, or for this marriage to work, it's not going to be abusive, or my children are not going to be abused, and that's my condition. And if that condition is crossed, then I can't be in a relationship with you anymore. So we either need to give up the idea of unconditional love in adult relationships, or we need to define what that is for us, and we can hang on to unconditional love, but it doesn't have to be an unconditional relationship. So while I'm pro-marriage and supporting marriage and giving it all you've got, I also would never want to support anybody in staying in a marriage that's really toxic and unhealthy, especially if you have children in this marriage And there's a way to show something different, because what we're really talking about is breaking generational patterns and setting up a family legacy that you can be proud of. And if you go back to your life dreams and you get really clear on what that is for you, let that guide you. You know, my standards aren't going to guide yours, but do the inner work of figuring out what that is for you and get really honest with yourself. Talk to other people who know you, talk to people who have your best interest at heart, people that you trust, and get some footing around that. Now, if you go through these questions that I've raised that you want to ask yourself with these 4 categories and you still don't have any more clarity, or you just really want to talk this through and you want to get some help with some perspective, you are welcome to book a free call with me. There's no strings attached. It is a free call. It's at monikahoyt.com/talk, and it's just to explore your dynamics in your situation, get a sense of really what's going on, what are the barriers for you. Maybe I can help identify those barriers, and then I would make some recommendations for you as well. So I will put the link in below. So that's it for me today, you guys. I hope that was really helpful in understanding the difference between acceptance and settling. If you guys have any questions about that, please let me know. All right, guys, if I don't see any questions, I will sign off. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. I'll be back next week with another live stream, and I'll be looking for your questions if you have any underneath the video in the comments below. Have a wonderful weekend, guys.